that whole experience, the things that I'd been through, made me more kind of acutely aware of the kind of internal void that I had. Professionally, I've been tattooing now for 7 years with my artwork, reclaim people's bodies from trauma. So it really gave me this sense of like purpose for a while. Being through that kind of thing at a tender age, I developed some bad habits, but God is with you always, and He is that structure for me. He is that rock upon which I build my house. So essentially, the Baha'i faith is an Abrahamic tradition that follows on from Islam. It's separate from Islam, but it's devoid of a sort of objective truth. And I was constantly looking for that sense of objective truth. The Baha'i faith was kind of everything and nothing at once. It's very kind of wishy-washy in its kind of doctrine and its kind of belief. And so I was kind of looking for something that was objectively true. So I suppose for those reasons, the Baha'i faith didn't appeal to me as a young person. I had been to church. I had been to different kind of church services and things like that, but it was always within the context of something else. So it was within the context of school or Cub Scouts or something like that. And eventually I went to a Church of England school. And that's where I really began to encounter we obviously studied the biblical corpus, looked at like Mark's gospel, studied Mark's gospel for 2 years, and Christian ethics and things like that. And so I really began to kind of encounter Christian ideas more and more, but I didn't really understand them at that time. I think at that point in my life I was very kind of, I wouldn't say skeptical, but I was very kind of inquisitive still about those kind of theological ideas. What does it mean to die to self and pick up your cross? And how could a loving God place that kind of demand on someone? Because again, at that point, I didn't know what it meant. So then at that point, while I was finishing my GCSEs, my parents' marriage broke down. My parents ended up getting divorced. And so myself and my mother actually fled the marital home because my father was becoming increasingly abusive to us and toward my brother as well. So I had I had an incredibly difficult time toward the end of school. I was grappling with all of those different things. I left school, and that whole experience, the things that I'd been through, kind of made me more kind of acutely aware of the kind of internal void that I had, that I was trying to fill with something. And so I went to music college, and I was around a lot of people who at that age, they were kind of indulging in a lot of kind of self-destructive habits, drink and drugs and things like that. And that never appealed to me. And I never kind of succumbed to those sorts of things, those sort of like substances, what have you, because I suppose those sorts of behaviors take control away from yourself. And I really wanted control of my life because my life had been quite chaotic up until that point. And so I tried to essentially assume control and take the reins of my life by myself. And so I became obsessed with kind of rigorous self-discipline. I threw myself into the world of work. I became a waiter. And then soon thereafter, I began tattooing. So professionally, I've been tattooing now for 7 years, since I was 18. And that really kind of gave me something to focus on. It gave me a sense of purpose, but it still didn't kind of give me that fulfillment and that peace. So the tattoo community or the tattoo industry as well, I've become increasingly despondent with it. It's a very toxic, quasi-demonic environment to be in. So I've withdrawn very much from the community of it, but obviously I know Christians feel certain ways about tattoos. Not all people sort of agree with them. But for me, like, tattooing has served as a way that I can contribute to other people's lives with my artwork, make people feel more confident, memorialize a person, with my artwork, reclaim people's bodies from trauma. So it really gave me this sense of purpose for a while. So I suppose, being a Catholic tattooist now, I'm really keen to, as Josemaria Escriva would say, sanctify my work, sanctify all aspects of my life. But, tattooing can serve as a way to inspire and evangelize people. There are so many conversations I've had with people because they've been curious about, a tattoo that I have that is religious, and it starts conversations about Christ and the gospel. And so I'm trying to kind of bridge that gap. All this time in my life, I was still had that deep sense of yearning. And having grown up in an abusive kind of situation and been through that kind of thing at a tender age, I developed some bad habits. I developed some kind of negative thought patterns and things like that. And I recognized that I hadn't really forgiven, for example, my father. And so at the age of 21, I actually went back to see my father and sort of have that kind of forgiveness. And so I forgave him. We didn't reconcile past that. We didn't kind of rebuild a relationship from there. I saw him as a child, and I saw him as an adult. He was exactly the same person, but having that kind of forgiveness really granted me so much peace. So I suppose having that kind of forgiveness and going back and forgiving my father really enabled me to be a forgiving person. And I obviously didn't have an earthly father that was there for me in the way I'd like, and so I kind of sought my heavenly Father, and I began reading a lot more about the Christian faith, specifically the Catholic faith, and listening to different podcasts and different voices and being exposed to different ideas. And it wasn't one kind of sudden overnight divine revelation that Christ is the way, that it was a gradual slices of heaven in every day that God revealed himself to me. And over the process of time, I began to realize that I needed to cement myself somewhere, because, like I say, I always sought that sense of structure in my life. I hate chaos. I'm an incredibly sort of orderly person. I try to be. And so I knew that my life needed spiritual framework and a moral structure. And so but paradoxically, I found to have a life that is structured, and to have a life that is non-chaotic, you actually have to give up control and surrender control. And so it was in the surrender I was kind of liberated from my whole thing. And it kind of helped me begin to then deal with some of the negative thought patterns and insecurities and bad habits that I talked about. And so at the age of 22, I began going to Mass. 22, 23, began going to Mass with my mum, who, as I say, grew up in the Anglo-Catholic Church. And then in October of 23, I was baptized, and I'd had my RCIA with the then parish priest and my spiritual director, Father Dominic. And I think I was naive in thinking that in coming to the church and in coming to Christ and surrendering my life in that way, that everything would be kind of smooth. That's not the case. So if anyone listening to this is, being called to the faith, then, it's not everything is smooth, obviously, but God is with you always, and He is that structure for me. He is that rock upon which I build my house. So not everything is a kind of, easy, smooth journey after, you've been baptized and come into your faith. And that's the other thing that I like about Catholicism, is that there is this emphasis on having a good, repentant attitude. Unlike other faiths and denominations that tell you, that you are like okay or whatever, it tells you that actually reminds you need Christ. You need to keep coming back to confession. And I think so, but in coming into your faith, you become much more kind of acutely aware of your sin, and the things that you grapple with and the things that you struggle with and your insecurities. And so I essentially became a much more kind of aware of my behavior, aware of succumbing to temptation, and the same thing that that I suspect most young men are affected by: anger, lust, laziness, lack of motivation. All of these things kind of give me the resolve to then cultivate good behavior in myself. And that's so I now understand what it means to die to self and to crucify your flesh every day. And it's not easy. It's not easy, but once you've realized God, you can't pull the wool back over your eyes, So I suppose Catholicism for me served as something that was diametrically opposed to the chaos in my life. But it was also diametrically to the chaos that I see in the world. If you look at the culture in which we live, it's sort of the antidote to the kind of self-worship that we see every day, and people worshipping their identity and their possession and the material lives that they lead. And so, and another thing for me was I was keen to kind of rectify the childhood I had in some kind of cathartic, perhaps selfish way. And I was adamant that I wanted to be married, and I wanted to have a good Christian union with someone. And so I suppose there's some kind of weird cosmic counterweight, for everything to become full circle and me to be the father that I wish I had had. And so I kind of was adamant that had to happen. And I entered into a semi-long distance relationship, and I think I kind of imposed that upon it. And I tend to pedestalize people, and not worship, but pedestalize people in romantic relationships. And I think that I became completely obsessed with this idea of my need for a created family, because that was what I wanted. And it did not work out. And I realized that I was too immature for it, and that perhaps it isn't for me. And that's fine, because it's not about what I want. It's not about what I want. It's about what God wants. And so I don't know where He'll steer me next, but I know He's called me to be more than I am. And so I'm going to continue that seeking, continue that yearning. And I'm really keen to continue in my faith and remain resolute in my faith, and have that resolve to be better and to learn more about the church and nurture my relationship with Christ. And one of the ways I'm doing that, as well as obviously in my career, is I'm actually studying at university now. So I'm studying religion and theology with Arabic. The project that I'm currently doing is on the revival of ancient Christian tattooing in the contemporary Middle East. So I'm trying to kind of bridge the gap between those two things. I find quite interesting. And I don't intend for my religious education to stop there. Once I have my degree, I just continue. I am keen to just continue learning more about my faith, and that's it. So, thank you for having me.